I'm Matt Godbolt.
And I'm Ben Rady.
And this is Two's Complement, a programming podcast. Hey Ben.
Hey Matt.
So we're trying a new recording setup here, so apologies if this sounds dreadful, but hopefully this will be less work for us in the future, which means maybe more frequent podcasts? Who knows? But maybe not.
Yeah, I'm not promising. You can promise that. I'm not promising that.
No, the whole point of this podcast is it was like zero to or low effort, right? That was what we've always promised each other, that this would not become yet another secondary job for either of us to do.
Even tertiary job. We're both parents. So.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, that's true. That is so very true.
Yeah.
So, anything to make our life easier, I'm down with. So we're giving a different setup a go here. And so there's every chance that this recording won't work at all. And you and I are just talking to each other just like a normal conversation and no one else will ever hear it. But I had a topic idea.
Okay.
So I've been doing Compiler Explorer now for a long old while. It has outgrown me. Like, I have a lot of help, a lot of open source contributors and some team members who are also hold the keys to the admin account on AWS so they can log in and administrate and all that kind of good stuff, which is great because there's only one me. And, I've gone out of my way over the years for trying to make it. I say I wouldn't have gone out of my way. I have tried to make it as self-serve as possible for things like adding new libraries, adding new compilers, adding different languages. There's readmes about how to do it. So a lot of my job these days is approving other people's PRs, merging them in, and then doing sort of the DevOps-y style stuff where I push to the cloud, check the staging instance works, all the tests pass. And by all the tests, I mean I click around in the IDE a little bit, in the UI a little bit, and nothing seems to obviously go wrong. And then I push to production and I shut down the staging instances and I send a little email out and then I go to bed, as it's usually very late by that point. And it occurs to me that this is not, we've kind of reached a new scalability issue, which is like, I only have a finite amount of time and I'm having difficulty keeping up even with that. And the buck stops with me because it's me. It's my personal AWS account. It's my personal project. I mean, it's in its own GitHub repo. But it is me. There is no Compiler Explorer Limited. There is no foundation. There is no anything but my goodwill and the continued support of the community. And I'm wondering, one day, not soon, but one day I might have had enough of it all, or maybe even for the health of the community, before it gets so bad that people get upset with it, I should think about how to engage the community in a bit more of an active way to help run and administrate and make decisions about the site.
So you're saying you have 4 jobs then?
Oh my gosh. So I've just been pouring my heart out about like my worries about this, and you've been sat there going, I can make a joke at the end of this. You're a bad person.
I'm also listening.
I know you are,
but I'm
my friend.
also waiting because comedy is timing.
You're not wrong there. But it is another job, right? And I've kind of almost thought of it that way. And I'm very, very fortunate that I have a lot of sponsors, both commercial and Patreon patrons and whatever. But with that comes a kind of responsibility to do something with the funds that I get access to, that I get. And I've always kept in mind the fact that this isn't really about sponsoring me. The Patreons are not sponsoring me. They're sponsoring Compiler Explorer, which is me, but I want to keep a clear separation between those things. I have a separate bank account for everything. I scrupulously account everything every month to make sure that like the stuff that I have on AWS for me is accounted separately for all of the stuff that happens for Compiler Explorer and, all this kind of good stuff. Because I think at the back of my mind, I think I've been preparing for this kind of point where I will say, hey, maybe we need something else. And I don't know how to take this next step, really. And this is why we can make this recording in this fashion. Because if you go, I don't know how to help you. Then this is the end of the recording and we're done. Or else we just talk about it. And it's a bit of a vulnerable thing for me to say, but it is, it's difficult. It's difficult for me both from a letting go standpoint if I choose to, and also the fact that most people don't call it Compiler Explorer, they call it something else, which is kind of me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So having heard all of that, what are you thinking?
I mean, it's. I wish there was easy answers to these questions. There are never easy answers to these questions. I think it's very normal for people to outgrow things, right? Even great things, even awesome things, fun things, right? There's that sort of like, perspective that I try to share with a lot of people when they look back at their mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
They say, how was I so stupid to think that that was a good idea? It's like, well, imagine if you were standing here today and you didn't think it was a bad idea, right? Like you've grown, you've changed.
Yeah. Yep.
And that is also true for things that, were like passion projects or things that you were very excited in, right? Like you sort of like you ate the fruit. You sucked all the nourishment and joy out of it, and now you've just got a little peach pit and you don't need it anymore, right? Throw it in the trash, let it grow into a new tree somewhere. So the the like, I would do everything that I can, first of all, to assuage anything that even smells like guilt, leaving this to other people,
how well you read this.
other children, right? That is not what's happening here. Right.
Right.
So that thing first, right? In terms of the mechanics of how you actually do this and
Mm-hmm.
how you do it in a way that is going to ensure the longevity of this thing that is valuable to so many people and something that you're very rightly very proud of, I'm sure, that's a trickier question that maybe involves lawyers
Yeah, that's the
or
worry I have.
accountants
Yeah.
or other folks of whom I am certainly not. But I think that the sort of direction that you're heading is a good one and one that I would be surprised if you never took.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like at some point you're going to outgrow this thing.
Or moreover, I owe it to the community to have more of a say in the way that their tool, because it is more theirs than it is mine these
Yeah, right.
days, right? That is steered. There's 50 odd languages on there, and there's only like two of them that I could even remotely put a hand up and say, well, yeah, I would use that, and I understand why it's useful, and I understand the needs of that community, and yeah, it would be hubristic in the extreme to think that I'm the best person to champion this. I'm just the one who happened to have come up with the idea at the beginning and kind of followed through. And now here I am going, oh, who? How come I'm in? Who let me in charge of this? Right.
Right,
And so
right,
it might
right.
be more, And I suppose the way that I'm trying to think about this is what are the principles that are important to me that whatever happens next, I would like to maintain. And just thinking out loud, one of
Mm-hmm.
those is like, it's never been about money. It's never been trying to make money. I'm delighted that it is effectively above water, I'm glad to say, as in like with the sponsorship and the Patreons that I get and the PayPal, whatever, is more than it costs us, which is great. But that goes into a bank account and is accounted for. It's not like my outlandish expenditure on myself as a result is yeah. There is
Mm-hmm.
no such thing. Anyway, but so I don't never want it to be commercial. I never want folks to feel that they have to pay or have to subscribe or have to register or have to sit through ads or all that kind of stuff. I've done
Mm-hmm.
quite a good job, I think, of having the sort of the chrome of the sponsors be very out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
So much so actually that it was really kind of annoying when ad blockers started blocking even our tiny little thing at the top right that said, thanks to our sponsors Google and Intel or whatever. And they're like, yeah, we blocked your ad. I'm like, it really? You're gonna like, this site is completely free, and if it wasn't for their goodwill, we wouldn't be. Yeah. Anyway, so that's one thing, is the financial part of it, and the common thing in open source is to go sort of the freemium route. I think he
Sure.
said route then. Good grief, I'm so confused. I don't know where I live anymore. I mean, it's been 13 years. Give me some fairness. But route, the route of making it so that everyone gets some baseline set of features, and then if you want the cool stuff, you have to pay.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
has never really been. It is kind of obvious to see how you could do it. I could justify it even. You could say, I have 5 machines that do the world's compilations, and then if you subscribe, you get a dedicated instance or some subset of. It's the thing about that is it smells like we're trying to make money, and I don't see it as a business. I don't want to see it
Mm-hmm.
as a business.
See aforementioned fourth job.
Correct. Correct. And there is a world, there is a world in which I could fully accept it as an actual job and say, no, goodbye my day job. It's been thank you for all of the the help thus far, but I'm going to go off and do something on my own, and I could try and turn this into a real job. But I don't think there's enough money in it to support me and my family, let alone the other folks who are involved in it. And B, like anything, it's only fun when you don't have to do it.
Right.
And that, I think, is the real key here. And even now, when I spent a couple of years not doing so much C++ programming, it became more of a burden to work on the site because I'm writing TypeScript and JavaScript and I'm doing
Yeah.
Bash and I'm doing that stuff. And at no point is it actually useful to use the site myself. At no point was I dog fooding it. Was there any,
Mm-hmm.
it could have gone down and I probably wouldn't have noticed. At least these days I'm doing a bunch of C++. And so I get to use it and I kind of go, this is cool. But I use precisely 2% of the functionality of the site.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the 98% is other people's stuff. So, anyway, that would only get worse if all I was doing was working on it all day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Tempting though it is from a certain points of view. So I don't think it's a business. And that means that really, I think it has to be a community project run by the community for the community. And then your question obviously is, who even are the community?
Right. Right. Well, yeah. I mean, this is definitely not an unprecedented problem. So you look at folks like Linus Torvald and
Guido van Rossum,
yeah,
perhaps, the Python.
exactly. Benevolent dictator for life.
Yeah.
Anytime you sort of have these things that are built by one sort of motivated individual and then sort of get picked up by a broader community, you almost certainly have a moment where there needs to be a separation between those two things for the good of everyone. And that can go well and it can go poorly.
Right.
but I think at a certain level of growth it becomes inevitable. So maybe now's that time.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. I mean, I don't want to, anyone who's listening to this, if indeed we ever put this out, I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon, but I'm getting to the later stages of my career, and at some point, maybe I won't want to be doing this all the time. And it would be nice to have had a planned and slow and a handover process where I was actively involved for a long time before I actually wave off goodbye. It's all. And having just said this, now I'm having a sort of flush of embarrassment, even thinking that we've just essentially tacitly compared what I've done with Linus and Guido van Rossum, which I they're thematically similar, but on the scale it's very, very different. But there are things to learn from those things, and yeah, I would like to leave it in a decent state. And then there's just that thing of who is the community? Because the obvious thing would be to reach out to the compiler folks of the world, and most of the ones who can actually support it are the commercial ones. So Intel and Microsoft, and I don't know, Red Hat perhaps would be behind GCC. I don't know who would be the right people behind that. And there are some, there are some not for profits as well. But I'm a little skeptical, and this is perhaps not the kind of thing I should say and put in quote public, but I worry about the motives of folks when
Right.
it's their commercial interest, and they are, for good reason. They have they've got a different spin on this, and it's always Compiler Explorer has always been about the users and not about pushing any particular agenda at all. So I would be a little concerned about handing over any sort of control or even a bit of control to these folks. But then I also don't know whom else might be a good steward, or like
Yeah.
like a board of folks, and maybe
Right.
half dozen people that would be like, yeah, we make the decisions about this. Here's the bank account. Here's the AWS stuff. All right, what are we going to do? How are we going
Hmm.
to use our resources? How are we going to engage with the community? How are we going to decide prioritization of things that do get fixed versus the thousands and thousands of things that get filed and nothing ever happens about? That kind
Hmm.
of stuff. And
Hmm.
so maybe if our listener is even present in given the fact this may not go out, then ideas would be welcomed. And I think in order to get my own head together, this is part of that process.
Hmm.
But I think also I need to write down some kind of like guiding principles myself about what it is that makes Compiler Explorer the success that it's been. And then that can be sort of at least a starting point for the next steps. But this is a weird conversation to have. And
Hmm.
the second and possibly the weirdest part is obviously it's Compiler Explorer, but everyone refers to it as Godbolt, and it's on my personal domain, and I have other things
Hmm.
on that domain. And like, if I were to actually do a full separation, then I have to start worrying about, well, do I lose my domain? Do I lose my email address? Do I lose my other funny little projects that end at godbolt.org? I'm
Hmm.
sure that, again, as you said, there are legal people, there are accountant people who
Right.
can probably come up with the correct and creative solutions to this kind of stuff. Or do I say, no, actually, this is the point where Compiler Explorer becomes really Compiler Explorer, and I reclaim my name and
Hmm.
I redirect, obviously, so that we don't lose it. But like ultimately, the canonical name becomes Compiler Explorer, but it's a lot longer, and B, it's not as memorable, and I hate that. I hate
Yeah.
that
I
that's
mean,
true.
I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change the domain name for you. Something that just struck me, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but
No, this is good.
I
Anything to
wonder
deflect from this.
if actually there's a huge tax windfall that you have that you may not necessarily be aware of, which is if you created a actual charitable organization and you gave the domain to that charitable organization,
Yeah,
you could probably get someone to value that domain for you, and you'd be able to take a tax deduction because of it.
that's
Because
an
it's a
interesting
charitable
point.
it's just like giving them a car. Like, here's a car that's worth $20,000. You get to take a tax deduction for that. Here's a domain name that's worth $20,000. I don't know what it's worth, but let's
No, I
just
don't know
say,
what it's worth. I don't
right.
know, but yeah, no, it's
But
interesting. It's
like,
an
if you
interesting
actually
point.
gave it to them, to that organization, that's a charitable contribution. I don't know.
Yeah,
See, this is where you need the accountants,
that's where I
because
need an accountant. I need to know. I need to
I am not
work
an
out
accountant. I
whether
am
or
just
not.
someone that nerds out about taxes. But
No, indeed you do. Much to my chagrin, when you start talking about all this stuff on the train on the way home, and then I'm like, I've never even considered this. Oh gosh, I'm so naive when it comes to this stuff. Which actually is another thing, right? Like at the moment, this is all
Mhm.
or the whole thing is me. So I get all these funds in, and I pay tax on the funds, and then I pay them out. And I mean, I think my accountant does some clever things, but
Right.
I don't know for sure.
Right, right, right. Well, yeah, I mean, anytime you have money involved in these kinds of things, it starts to get a little messy, and you gotta, I think sounds like you've done a very admirable job of keeping them separate, which is critical. But it's like at a certain point, you need some professional help
I,
in keeping track of all this stuff,
oh right. I thought you meant something
and
else. So
maybe
that's also
also the
true.
mental kind. But
Yeah, that's
that
right. I
comes
mean,
later.
there's not. Yeah, that is
That comes
definitely.
3 years from now when you're like, I made a huge mistake. I should never have done
I've
this.
never done this thing. Right. I mean, it is true. I mean, yeah. So that's the other thing. I was speaking with another friend of ours about this kind of thing down the pub the other day, and he said, like there's a lot of things to think about, and some of these things came up in that conversation. And one of them was like, well, in 5 years' time, if the name has gone, the colloquial name has gone with it, and then it goes bad, then you can't distance yourself from it. You can't undo that.
Yeah.
So that's worth considering and worth thinking about. I don't imagine that it would, and probably by the time I've stepped away far enough from it that I'm not able to correct anything that I feel is bad, then maybe it won't matter as much. And also, turns out other people have this name too. I know it's not that common, but
Right,
I'm not
right,
the only one. I mean, one of them is making a loud noise in the background with the same name.
right, right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and on that topic, I have to say, I think your instincts about not having a board, let's say, that's made up of compiler manufacturers, is that the right word? Writers,
Vendors, I
creators?
suppose.
Yes,
Yeah.
vendors, is the right move here because, however, you know, well-intentioned
And
their
they are.
intentions might
They would
be,
be, and they are. And I'm working with
yes,
them now. But
yes, they're just fundamentally not going to be aligned with all of the things that I heard you say in the lead up to this. That's just not where their attention is going to be. That's not where
yeah,
their focus is going to be. So, again, having thought about this 1/100,000th as much as you have.
well, you're doing pretty well for somebody who's been put on the spot with
Yeah.
no prep.
I would say that having some leadership for whatever type of organization ends up controlling this, that is purely focused on the community, is good. The
Right,
the trick there, of course, is going to be find people that don't lose interest, right? Because one
right.
thing you would not have to worry about with Microsoft or someone else is that they would lose interest. They have a whole company of people who can be paid to be interested.
That's
Right.
yes,
Yes.
that's a very valid point. I mean, so the flip side of that occurred to me when I was thought experimenting this whole thing is that, like, by getting folks who are who are from a commercially interested party, as you said, they're paid to be interested. That also means that there's excuse me, there's potential for those folks to be able to weave it into their day job more than, say, I can. Right? We're with the best will in the world, this is not something I can do during my working hours because it doesn't really affect our day job. And quite reasonably, they're like, yeah, well, we'll turn a blind eye if something's on fire, but you can't be hacking on it during the day. That's not what you're here for, and that's fine. But if Microsoft of this world was like, well, I mean, just to be clear, my friends at Microsoft are already dedicating quite a lot of time and effort to keeping the Microsoft compilers up and running on their own sort of sister site to ours, which we shell out to. So we already are getting the benefit of that kind of commercial help. And there are some other vendors who help out too. So we're already kind of in that situation. But yeah, they're not steering the show. I still ultimately get to say, yeah, we're not doing that for certain things,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of important to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then discovering the right set of people. Obviously, the existing folks who are most involved with running the site right now are very obvious candidates to be on a board. But the trying to get like a rounded breadth of folks that represent not just the people who are very C++ focused like we are, but also other languages and other use cases. Yeah, it's an interesting and difficult question, and certainly I'm not trying to come up with answers here, but I am really interested in hearing what you had to say about this, and so that's got me thinking now. And live on air
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
some definition of live.
Some definition of life. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't envy you. These are hard things to sort out, and finding the people that you trust to take this kind of stuff over is not going to be. I mean, as you say, you already have a group of people that are probably your pool of candidates, but you also have to make sure not to put those people in a situation where they don't have the help and resources that they need to maintain things. And
Right.
I think this is why you generally form a board for these types of organizations, is to have people who don't necessarily spend a lot of time on it, but are able to provide resources, provide guidance, to just sometimes like raise a flag and be like, whoa, you're going to do what?
Right. Yeah.
That, someone who has a little bit more low level focus just isn't going to be able to do or see or take care
Yeah.
of,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
As you say, this is why you have like presidents of boards that are like very almost separate from them and from the day to day running of it. It's more about the steering and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm. Right.
yeah, I'm gonna have to go and get myself some fairly expensive consultancy with as you say, legal people and see what my options are as well. Because obviously, being in the US gives me certain access to things. It's an international project. I don't know if that changes anything. If we wanted to have board members that were outside the US, and is there any difference between all the various random 501c whatever 3 and 6 and 12 and Levi 501s, whatever the things are. I don't know. I don't know anything about this. I've done.
Compiler Explorer, a Cayman Islands Corporation. Is
That's
that?
right. Yeah. 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 Well, I mean, if nothing else, this has been a very very helpful and cathartic for me to get this out of my mouth and into the airwaves. And
Mm-hmm.
the only other person really, as I say, there was a person down the pub that I went to where I spoke a little bit about this the other week, and I've been chatting a lot with Google Bard or whatever it's called these days. They've just
Okay.
changed it to something else to
Yeah.
try and understand. This is my first genuine use case that wasn't just toy, is asking various questions and trying to get some feedback from AI. So AI, is helpful. No, well, thank you for letting me talk this through. And
Absolutely. Anytime.
this is probably, if this goes out, this will be one of the most weird episodes we've ever made. It's more of a kind of monologue.
Weirder than the one where we just did DNS configuration for 2 episodes?
Maybe not.
Maybe I think that's probably the tops.
That is probably the weirdest one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not wrong. All right, well, I guess we'll call it here.
Sounds good.
You've been listening to Two's Complement, a programming podcast by Ben Rady and Matt Godbolt. Find the show transcript and notes at www.twoscomplement.org. Contact us on Mastodon. We are at twoscomplement@hachyderm.io. Our theme music is by Inverse Phase. Find out more at inversephase.com.